everybody, it's Kairos here with another Jungle Concepts video. Today we are going to talk about how to plan out your first clear. Understanding this concept can be the difference between counter ganking for a double kill and first blood, or getting spam pinged by your mid laner who just died while you're clearing your gromp. If you find this video helpful and want more content like this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and join me on the journey to 1K subs. Now let's get into it. First question to ask when setting up your first clear is, what camps should you clear? So this is super champion dependent, and what you want to look at is whether your champion can clear AoE camps or if they want to focus on single target camps. So some of the champs that can clear AoE camps are Shyvana, Fiddlestick, Sejuani, Olaf, and Karthus. They have abilities that can target multiple camps and multiple creeps at the same time, and so you can clear the camps much quicker and much more healthily. And so these champions can actually clear any of the camps because they don't have really limitations of what they can do healthily and quickly. And then the second group of junglers are down here, champions like Elise, Lee Sin, Trundle, Warwick, Jarvan. They all prefer to clear single target camps. If they do take an AoE camp, it'll cost them a lot of health and, more importantly, a lot of time. And so the camps that they usually tend to focus on are the red, wolves, blue, and gromp, because they can do them much more quickly and get out onto the map faster. Another clearing strategy that opens up for junglers that can clear AoE camps or want to farm to level 6 is just the full clear. I won't go into this too much because it's pretty straightforward, but these are some examples of champions that they really just want to hit a level 6 power spike, scale up and get further into the game and really pop off in team fights. And so these champions will most likely just be full clearing their jungle, trying to power level. And in these scenarios, you can either use that opportunity as the opponent to get a free gank on an enemy, knowing that they can't respond, or use it to invade to get on top of them and to try and kill them in their jungle, because they tend to be a lot more vulnerable in the early game. And so these junglers will path a little bit differently than others because they don't have as much lane interaction early on. The second question to ask is, what lanes can I make an impact on? So what you want to do as you're loading into game is go through each lane and score them in terms of gank ability. The things that you're looking for are crowd control available, mobility spells, and then also summoner choices in each lane. And you want to basically just keep a tally of the score on each lane and the difference between your laner and their opponent. So starting at top, Maokai has his Q, which is crowd control, and he also has his W, which is crowd control, and he probably has flash. Doubt he takes ignite. And then the Tryndamere probably has just flash, and then he has his E as a mobility spell. And so Maokai wins that, 3-2. And so he has an advantage in gank ability. And we look at LeBlanc versus Kassadin. She has her dash, she has her chain, and she also has flash and probably ignite, so she gets 4 on that. Versus Kassadin, he probably just has his flash. And so this is a huge discrepancy. She's actually up by 3 in that. Then we look at bot lane. Janna has the crowd control. She has her tornado, and then she has one pretty significant slow, so we'll give her a point for that. Then Ezreal has his dash, and they both have flash available. And bot lane, Lucian has his flash, he has his dash. Braum has his passive, he has his Q slow, he has flash, and he might have ignite in this lane also. And so this one, you could argue that they have a small advantage in gank ability, but Ezreal Janna is a little bit hard to gank proactively because they have a lot of escape tools. So this is how you'll determine which lanes look the most beneficial for you to gank, and also which lanes look the best for your opponent to gank. So with all this considered, it looks like mid lane, pre-6 before Kassadin gets his second dash, is a really good lane to try and focus early on. Kind of along those same lines, with each lane you want to look at where you expect the lane to be positioned at the 3-minute mark, or about whenever you finish your first clear that you decide on. And so if we look up at top lane, these are both melee champions. So one thing that you factor into that decision is ranged versus melee. If they're both ranged, if they're both melee, has significant impact. And so since these are both melee, they'll likely be trading in the wave. They'll be pretty close to each other, which opens up some opportunities for ganks, because if Maokai walks up to the Tryndamere won't think anything of it. That will give Maokai the possibility to use his crowd control, get on top of Tryndamere as the gank happens. And then in mid lane, this is actually ranged versus a melee Kassadin, and so you can expect that he will be pushed in early on, unless you tell your LeBlanc to just last hit and to not pressure him out if you're trying to gank. And so with that expectation, you know that Kassadin will probably be a little bit more safe. That might give him more, just more resources, that he won't be in as dangerous of a spot with the LeBlanc being able to all in. And so that's one thing to consider. And then right here you have a melee support against 2 ranged, and so in general this lane will probably push in because they're able to poke. If the Braum steps up for CS, he has to back up, but at the same time they have to respect the all in. And so you can kind of anticipate where the lane is going to be as you clear at 3 minutes based on the ranged versus melee matchup. And you should use that to your advantage of communicating with your laner if you don't want them to push, if you're planning on ganking their lane, and then they could set up a kind of exception to the rule where you're able to access that lane because they've set it up for you. And I'll show you how this changes in top lane real quick. If instead of having the Tryndamere, there's another top lane that's actually ranged, maybe something like a Kayn. And so we'll put Kayn up here against the Maokai. Oh, he's on the wrong side. Okay, there we go. So the Kayn up against the Maokai, that would change this whole outlook, because now Maokai will likely be pushed in. The Kayn has the range advantage and can poke. And so if Maokai walks up, Kayn will know that something's going on and he'll probably back up. But at the same time, if Kayn is shoving in, he will have to overextend to continue farming if he is pushing the wave, which puts him in a more vulnerable position up here versus being back here or in the middle of the wave. And so it has an inherent trade-off. If your laner is getting pushed in, they'll likely not be able to move through the wave because they want to CS that, but this laner is going to be overextended in the lane. And so there's kind of another example of what it would look like with a different lane state. So now we can put all that information together. We're starting with Elise on blue side, and so we know that she wants to clear single target camps, which would be the red and then these 3, and so those should be incorporated into her clear. And then finally, we've identified that mid lane is the most gankable. It has a lot of opportunity to kill the Kassadin, to snowball the LeBlanc, and so that's where you want to path to. So from there, the question to ask is, how can Elise path towards mid lane, clearing jungle camps that she wants to clear as quickly as possible? So she has 2 options. First, she could do red buff up into blue and then Gromp to get it fairly quickly. She could, because Gromp needs to be in the first clear to hit level 3, she could do red up into Gromp and then blue, which gives her a little bit of momentum coming back towards mid. Or I think my favorite would be blue, Gromp, coming over for red, and then coming up to gank here. I like this one because typically the enemy jungler will just say it's something like a Graves. The enemy jungler will probably get a leash from his bot lane and then clear up into their top side, and so this should be a good gank route for her to come and gank the Kassadin in the mid lane. And so that's basically how you determine. You pick the camps that you want to clear, the lane that you want to impact, and then you chain those camps in a way that it makes sense and that it will lead you to the end result of where you want to go. And so I think that this would be a really good path into that outcome. Now we're going to change it up a little bit and look at it from the perspective of the red side. And I changed this out to a Sejuani. And so with the lanes, let's figure out what would be a good path for the Sejuani to take. And so one thing that you want to do is, as you're looking and as you're calculating the scores like we did earlier, we say Maokai has 3, Tryndamere has 2 because he has his dash and he has his flash. Maokai has 3 benefits to ganking that lane, and actually Tryndamere probably has Ignite also, which factors in for the Sejuani coming up to gank. And when you're looking at these lanes, you can also add in your own champion to that. And so Sejuani brings to the table, she has her Q, she has her passive, and she also has her flash. And so she has 3 abilities that are going to help her out on a gank. So 3 plus Tryndamere's 4 up here. So they have a 7 versus the Maokai just has the 3. Or if Elise is here and she has her Cocoon and she has her dash, then they have a combined 5. But 7 is greater than 5, and so this is a fight that they would be willing to take in the 2v2, even if Elise shows up. And so I think that the Sejuani would really like to head up top as one of her options. And so since she can clear AoE camps, she has anything available to her, but she only needs to hit level 3 to have her passive and all her Q, all of her tools available. And so I think that a good path for her, she could honestly take quite a few, so we'll go through the options. First, she wants to start on blue side so that she can path up towards top and impact that lane. So she could do blue, and then wolves, raptors, red into a gank. And then another option that I like quite a bit to hit level 3 is to take blue straight to red, Q over the wall, or actually walk around to get to krugs, and then gank top. So that way you are getting level 3 off of only 3 camps instead of having to clear 4, and then you can come in and gank that lane. And in this scenario, even if Elise, since we kind of determined Elise wants to clear towards mid, if she changes that up and she clears towards top, I still think that the gank in the 2v2 in top is advantageous for the red side, for the Tryndamere and the Sejuani, because they the math that we did earlier, 7, 5, they should come out on top of that. And finally, the last piece of finding out what jungle clear you should do, which is the third question asked, what is the enemy jungler trying to do? And so we'll pretend that we are the Sejuani in this scenario, and we already ran through all the scenarios of what the Elise could do. That she's really looking at this mid lane, thinking that that would be a good opportunity for her to gank. And so we could look at alternative routes as the Sejuani and kind of put aside what is most efficient for us or what is best for us in the top lane, and we could say we want to protect this Kassadin. And so this is another way to think about your first clear. Not so much of what lane can I impact, but of what lane is their jungler trying to impact, and how can I make sure that they aren't able to do that. Because eventually the Elise will fall off in the late game and the Sejuani will get stronger. And so this is another thought process that should come into your mind as you're figuring out your first clear. You'd be thinking also about where the enemy jungler wants to path to. And so in this scenario, we'll look at the Sejuani, knowing that the Elise probably wants to impact mid at about level 3. So the Sejuani could take several paths that would end up with her around mid lane at the 2.5 to 3 minute marks. So she could clear her full bot side and then come in, and as she's walking across here, start the raptors, but be in range where she can impact that lane. Also, she could walk through and after this get a ward in this area, and then Kassadin can hover towards that side knowing it's safe, and so she can kind of set up her pathing around what she expects the Elise to do in this situation and be there to respond, to kind of keep the Kassadin safe and make sure that they do get to outscale what is a team comp that's going to fall off pretty hard in the late game versus their Tryndamere and Kassadin and Ezreal outscaling the Lucian there. And so that's another way that you can think about your first clear and where you want to be on the map. And that's going to do it for this Jungle Concepts video. To summarize real quick, the 3 questions to ask are: first, what camps should I clear based on my champion? Second, what lanes can I impact? And then third, what is the enemy jungler trying to do, and how can I keep them from doing that? If this video is helpful, please leave a like, a subscribe, comment down below what was the most useful tip for you, and I will see you in the next video.
Boy, I am